So let's now get into the rule sheet that we're starting with, 0_address. And we'll see here that I have the natural language view overlaying my various different actions here. And I'm going to toggle over so my rule vocabulary is in view so I can drag and drop as I build these rules. So to start with and just make clear what the various different aspects of this syntax is doing, I've created this natural language, which is always available to be entered into in place of all of the different fields in a rule sheet in the conditions, the actions, as well as in the filters, which we'll get into in a moment over here on the left-hand side. So I'm filtering out the entirety of any instance where Corticon is evaluating UI.current stage number, any instance except where that field has the value of 0 within it. So think of this as I'm throwing I will be executing at every single stage of the form the entirety of this rule flow, but I will only be actually entering and evaluating what rules are operating upon the data only when it meets the criteria defined in that filter, where current stage number equals 0 in order to access the logic within here. Otherwise, it'll bounce off it and carry on to any other node where it does meet the filter that's been defined. That means I don't need to, again, create those current stage numbers in any order in particular. I can bounce around as applicable and only render fields necessary based upon a user's selections, and thereby only use these or navigate through the course of this form using these identifiers for what should happen when, less importantly bearing in mind the order in which they are happening, other than just starting with 0. In all stages we're going to start with 0, but basically from there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what renders when based upon what conditions, etc. So the first thing we're always doing is creating a container. The container is going to have, as we covered, a ID and a title. It has optional attributes we can use as well, but those are the ones that are required. We're creating this container entity and assigning the ID and title to be homeowner's insurance quote. You'll see I'm using this backslash here because of the fact that this is that backslash is an escape character, which will just tell Corticon that I'm not done with my string of text, even though I'm using this apostrophe right here. I create strings of text here in quotes, but Corticon wouldn't know that I'm not done after this if I didn't have this backslash to say homeowners is going to have an apostrophe, but I'm continuing to write this string of text. Then I'm going to create a UI control type of please enter the address for this location with an ID of 1. I will create the other fields as well with potentially default values as well as where to store the data that's being created. You'll see that I have, when I'm using a read-only text UI control, I'm using the value field for that string of text, and I'm not using the field name attribute at all since I'm not going to be storing any data based upon it. In all the other UI control types, I'll be using the label field for just a string of text that will be the description of what to actually enter in a given field. And I'll be using the field name attribute, assigning this to be the name of the attribute that I want to be the field name, specifically the attribute, underneath the path2data entity where I want to store the user's response. So in terms of order of events, when I am rendering this particular rule sheet, I might have zero aspects of the data already accrued upon which I want to make this insurance policy determination. So I might have a totally empty quote, and I want to be filling out the values along the way. So that's why I first created the path2data being property, and later on I'll actually be switching it over to be quote. I'm setting the path2data to be first property, and I'm going to, depending on what I assign the field name to be of a given UI control, the input of this particular one with the ID of 2. It's going to be a string of text that I can enter as the end user interacting with the form. I'll be presented with a prompt that says street address. Whatever I enter will be stored in the field street address underneath the entity property, because that is where the path to data is. And the default value, the pre-filled out text there, will be 123 Main Street. When I hit next, that'll all be parsed out by the front end and slotted into that JSON structure that matches what I've created here. The property.streetAddress will now have whatever value I have entered into that particular field, assuming I overwrote 123 Main Street, in which case, if I did not, then it would just keep that 123 Main Street and slot that into property.streetAddress. So let's toggle it off and talk about the actual syntax that we're working with in this particular rule sheet.